This is a conversation with Osman Samiuddin. He's a senior editor at Cricinfo and a well-renowned cricket writer. He's a celebrated historian of Pakistan cricket, having authored the book The Unquiet Ones, A History of Pakistan Cricket. In this conversation, we discussed getting into cricket in the Middle East, the Haal of Pakistan, and the connections between Pakistan cricket and the country's culture, music, history, and politics. And we also discussed slightly lesser known cricketers like Shahid Afridi, Virender Sehwag, Brian Lara, and Shane Warne. This is no time. If you like what you see, then do hit subscribe on YouTube. I'm keeping a list so I know exactly who's not followed so far, so better get to it. Follow on Spotify or rate 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. This project is a labor of love. It's a new phrase I've learned this week. So if you'd like to see it continue, then do consider making a donation on Patreon. And thank you to the people who continuously do so. For other forms of love and support, and follow this channel on Instagram or Twitter, write me postcards, or you can follow me personally. And now you know at the end of the day what really matters is it's no time. There's a Sufi saying by Rumi which says that if light is in your heart, you will find your way home. You grew up in the cricket crazy nation of Saudi Arabia and you discovered cricket like most kids in the Middle East do through TV, through VHS tapes in your case, through magazines in the first case, and also, of course, tape ball cricket. When I was growing up in the Middle East, cricket was one concrete, solid link for me, one connection for me for my roots in India. Because I'm not sure if you resonate with this as well, but I feel it's a very unique situation in the Middle East where kids who grow up there often feel a warped sense of identity, a certain limbo where they feel like they don't belong in either place because there's limited adoption of the local culture in the Middle East and you don't really live in the country that you actually come from, right? So for me, cricket was that one anchor that allowed me to build some form of identity, some pride in the country that I come from. Interestingly, in one previous interview, you mentioned that it wasn't until you were traveling in Pakistan and researching for the Unquiet Ones that you truly started to feel Pakistani because you felt that you were giving in those hours at that point. So my first question for you is, when you were growing up in the Middle East as well, do you think cricket for you was also this one connection with your roots? Do you think it gave you this one popular anchor along which you could build some form of fledgling identity around being Pakistani?
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think growing up in the Middle East, I wasn't confused about my identity because, it's very clear, as you know, and we were living in Saudi Arabia and it's not the same in the UAE, it's a little bit different. But in Saudi Arabia, there was never any question that you were part of that country. You were an expat there, always. So, I think the feeling in the family, in the household, whatever, among friends and family there was always that, at some point you're going to go back, whether you go back to Pakistan, whether you go back somewhere else. And you are Pakistani. We used to visit Pakistan every year or every other year, for summer holidays. My dad was a professor, so we used to get really long summer holidays. And so we used to go to Pakistan, every other year we'd go to Pakistan where I'd be with my cousins and my friends there. And everything was about cricket at that time. So I think that connection was always there with Pakistan. And I think what cricket did, and actually the biggest thing that cricket did was give me like a vent for just energy and physical energy that I have in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, there wasn't that much to do, to be perfectly honest. Dubai has always been, UAE has always been a little bit more kind of with it and more opportunities to do stuff there. And in Saudi, there wasn't. There really wasn't. I used to go to a nice school, an international school, where I used to play a lot of football. But, cricket was the other thing that I did to just keep myself from not getting bored. It's ironic because, some of the first cricket I saw was that 1986-87 series between Pakistan and India, which is possibly, apart from that last test, it's one of the most boring series that the two have played out recently. So, I mean, it was always a part of like being Pakistani. And I clung on to it, one as a physical release, as something to do. And of course, it kept me in touch with, I'll forever be grateful. I think I've written about this, a neighbor of ours, very close family friends, we've known them for years and years, 45 years now, I guess, Javed Rizvi and his family. And he was a big cricket fan. He used to subscribe to the Pakistani Cricketer. And so, he used to get it every month. And I used to go to, literally, they were our next door neighbors. And I used to go to his house, every day we used to meet. And I used to go and I used to borrow his magazines and never give them back. So, I built up my own kind of collection of these magazines. And that was a way of kind of, just staying in touch with what was happening because, there was no internet, there was no Cricinfo, there was nothing. And so that was one way of kind of keeping up to date with what was happening in world cricket. It was a great magazine. So, yeah, I mean, in a sense, it was an anchor and it was linked to identity. Of course, if I wasn't Pakistani, I wouldn't have been into it maybe in that same way. Essential part of my growing up, like yourself. It was the only difference, I guess, with you is that you guys at least had Sharjah, right, where teams would come and play every now and again. In Saudi, we had nothing. We just kind of watched on TV.
I was unfortunate to be in that lean period where there were no matches happening in the UAE because there was a whole decade where nothing happened. So I know exactly when you say that things were happening. There was up till 2005 or 2010, I believe, not much was happening in the UAE as well. It's just this entire boom that came later, and people forget that it was. In fact, so I completely resonate with when you're saying there's not much to do at all. And also, one more thing I wanted to comment was when you said that the thought of that we are always going to go back is what always keeps us rooted to our background as well. This is something I keep hearing from all my friends in Dubai as well. And they've stayed there 20 years, their family friends, 25
One
years.
day we will go back.
One day we have to go back, but they never end up going back, even after retirement.
Yeah, entire generations. I know a family that's now in their third generation there. And they're not UAE citizens, they're still Indians, happily there, and each generation keeps saying that, we will go back, and they don't, because you just end up living there.
Just UAE things. Great that we get to discuss this here. So you did grow up with cricket as one anchor that really rooted you. And then when it was time for you to go to college, you went to the University of Manchester to study economics and governance, which is every cricket writer's dream. You're doing exactly
the way into cricket. Yeah.
It's just the way into cricket. And in a previous interview, you mentioned that one of the reasons why you picked it was because at that point, you feel like you didn't have the courage to pick history, which I completely resonate with because South Asian parents, of course. So as a lighter question, and you might have really stretched your imagination in this case, do you think you have any unique advantages of studying economics and governance that you were able to take into writing, or there's absolutely no link there?
I'd say that maybe studying something like that, and it was economics and government, but studying something like that maybe helped me get a broader perspective. So I'm not just rooted in the game when I read the game, when I watch the game. It's not just about the game. Of course, I look at the kind of the economics, the socioeconomic history of whatever, the player, the country, the club, whatever. So I think maybe in that way it gave me a broader perspective. And also, of course, the course was such that there was a lot of essay writing, right. And I think that's where I kind of I was no means was I a good writer by the end of university, but I kind of learned the discipline a little bit of how to structure an essay, how to structure arguments, because that's what you do in university. So I think it helped in that sense. And the thing we were saying about South Asian parents, so my parents never pushed me to do economics. My dad was very chilled out. Like I said, he was a professor. And my mom was also not kind of is not that kind of pushy kind. So they said, do what you want. Just be happy with what you want. But because I had grown up around South Asian kids and their parents, and all my friends were like, we're going to do finance, or we're going to do accountancy, or we're going to become an engineer, or we're going to do medicine. I was like, well, maybe I should do something that might get me a job in banking, for example, or some other kind of maybe management consultancy. And so I did it more because of my own fears that if I did a history degree, that I wouldn't be able to do anything afterwards. And it was nothing to do. My parents were like, you do what you want, you do what you're happy with. We're not going to push you. Just be happy in what you're doing. And I myself was so ingrained, I think, with the people around me that I was like, yes, I'll do economics. In my first year, I realized that the very heavy economic side of it, so the macroeconomics, the micro and the math side of it, it wasn't me after a while. And so I moved immediately after that first year, I moved more towards politics and the history of political thought and modern political thought and government studies and stuff like that. So I got to move away and be able to, I guess, develop, this preliminary kind of sense of writing or whatever, I think. And if I had stuck to a very hardcore economics degree, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to write a sentence to save my life, So I'm very happy, I guess, that I ended up doing something like politics and government at the end.
It's interesting. So you're able to hone at least some structure and discipline in writing. So there is some advice for kids out there who want to become writers. Just take up economics and...
I'm sure you can do history as well and enjoy it as well.
And enjoy it as well. Okay. Also, you touched upon this about your first series, and I wanted to ask you a question about first impressions. So between you and me, I think we have 3 to 4 different stories with very contrasting inductions into cricket. So your father never got into cricket because I think one of the first live matches he watched was at Dhaka, where Hanif
Hanif batted all day.
Yeah, batted all day, and he came out of the game thinking, "What a waste of time!" Right? One of your first series was Pakistan's tour of India. You just mentioned the one in 86, 87, which was largely drab, but the last test and of course Imran Khan's performances also turned out to be Sunil Gavaskar's last test series. So yeah, so turned out to be a slightly historic series in hindsight. And that was your induction into cricket, and that got you going. My father also never got into cricket. And I don't think it was one particular match. It was just a gradual lack of interest. But I'm sure if he had gone to watch Sunil Gavaskar's 36 of 174 live, then he would have also come out of it thinking, this is the biggest waste of my time, right? Me, in contrast, my first tournament I remember vividly was the 2003 World Cup.
Okay.
And then from there, it was India's tour of Australia. And then one series which I've never forgotten in my entire life. Remember all the scores, all the drama from it, all the plays, was India's tour of Pakistan in 2004. And that is a series I hold very close to my heart because that was the first series that actually showed me like how deeply cricket is ingrained into both countries' culture, and also how much history and subtext comes into play in between matches. And that's because in the first ODI at Karachi, it was a 6 required of the last ball, and there were all these flashbacks coming through, right? Interestingly, that was the first series you covered professionally as well. And you've described that first ODI in Karachi was like you felt the ground was shaking. There was so many tremors going through it because the atmosphere was that electric. So that was my induction into cricket, and that just got me hooked. So this brings me back to the first question that I asked, which was, how important do you think of first impressions? Do you think, is it just a stroke of luck, like a game of fortune where the first match of the first series I watched turns out to be so exciting and that gets me hooked into cricket? Or do you feel like cricket fans in general are kindred spirits and will end up gravitating towards the sport regardless of what the first match they watch is?
It's a really interesting question, actually, because, like I said, and like I've written, the first matches I saw, I used to, I got a videotape of, I think it was the Ahmedabad test of that 86-87 series between Pakistan and India. And I think, there was so in those days, we didn't have highlights. They used to tape the entire match, and went to a video store and they would give you the tape for day 1 or day 2 or whatever. So I sat through and I watched pretty much all of that test match. And I remember it was dull as hell. Like Rizwan Zaman scored 16 in a session, or maybe even less than that in one pre-lunch session and stuff. Very dull. But, it served a purpose in that I could spend my time doing it. I think we were on a holiday or something. Maybe it was like the winter holidays and stuff. And I'd gotten that tape. And so the series was, 6-7 months gone. But I got that tape eventually and I watched it. And it was a way to spend a day. I didn't have to be fixed into watching the entire thing, so I could do other stuff around it. But the match was just on the VHS, so I'd watch it. So I think it helped just pass the time, and and I think what it also did was kind of throw me into the intricacies of a test of test cricket. So you realized immediately at whatever age I was 10 or 11 then, and I realized immediately that unlike football, you don't just win and lose. There's a draw. And so that got me curious that, so you can actually have these really pointless test matches where you bat for like 3 days and the other team comes and bats for 2 days and then that's the game over and nobody's won. And it was an interesting bit of grey to kind of, to kind of encounter at the age of 11 or whatever. And until then, I used to watch basketball, I used to watch football, and they were all like, you have to win. Somebody has to win this game. If it's a draw, then you have penalties and you have to win. And suddenly here was cricket and it was like, 5 days and so... I think that helped, just the fact that it was grey. And what helps, I watch a lot of cricket now, and I think, my daughters, or my elder daughter, who's 10, she watches it because it's on in the house a lot of the time. And, she's now picking up like the different formats. And I don't think the result matters as much as, one, maybe how much it is on. So if it's on in your surrounding environment, people are talking about it, then I think you will have a general curiosity towards it. But I'll give you a really interesting example of my niece. So my sister's daughter, who'll hate me for mentioning her, so I won't take her name, but she's 14, she's in Karachi. And my sister has no massive interest in cricket. She knows that there are stars and Pakistan are okay or whatever. She knows her basic stuff, but no real interest in cricket. And her household, like her family, was not a big cricket family at all. Her husband and her kids and all, not a big cricket family. But her youngest daughter, my niece, suddenly I realized, I was told a few years back that she started playing cricket in Karachi, and there was nothing really around her directly that was telling her to play cricket, or like the match was on TV or something. There was nothing like that because nobody in the house really watches it. And yet, I think just by being in Pakistan, which is a country where a lot of cricket is played, and like stars are on billboards, and somewhere or the other, if you go to somebody's house, the match will be on. If you go out in the street, people will be playing tape ball cricket and stuff. And I think somehow it obviously made an impression on her, so that she started playing, and she plays regularly now. I mean, she's going through a period now where she's a little bit bored of it, but she's active. She plays. She goes to a club. She plays with boys. She wants to be a fast bowler and stuff, and she watches cricket now. But she kind of bloomed without any direct input of or influence on her. So it comes to you in all kinds of ways. I take cricket like you would take reading or music or art, like an interest in any of these things. It can happen intentionally when someone pushes you towards it, but the forces of these things are so strong that I think even without direct action or direct input, you can be pulled into it just because it's around you everywhere. And so it is around my daughter. She watches it. She knows about cricket. Who knows? She might start playing it. In my household, it wasn't around me at all. But, various people around me in Pakistan, there was always something. And then one day I decided to get that videotape, and boom, that's 30 years later, here I am, talking to you about it, having made a life, having made a career out of cricket.
This is exactly the trajectory you wanted, right? Talking to me about it. This is exactly what people
final destination.
Yeah, final destination. Yeah. I remember because so after I watched the 2003 World Cup, my parents did not they did not have the channel at home because they thought it will interfere with their studies. So I used to then follow all the other matches, the scorecards at the paper. So I used to read all the articles about it, and in a way just know the entire story of what happened without really watching it. So just create the story. So in a way, it's just like reading a book.
And exactly that, that allows you to build in your own imagination a picture of the sport that may not match what you see on TV all the time, but in your head, it's a really strong and vivid image of what a great game it is, right? And so that, I think that also always stays with you. Like, in my mind, cricket is, I don't know, like Wasim Akram Yorker, or Shoaib Akhtar bouncer, or Brian Lara cover drive, or, Sachin playing inside out or something. And these images, they may not match the actual reality of when I watch them, but in my head, they're there. And, they're strongly there. They're very vivid images. And that's what kind of sustains it all the time, because once it's in your head, it's like a virus. It's not going to get out.
I find it fascinating what attracts people to cricket or anything in general, what makes them connect for sure. Okay, so we've talked about a bit of your background. Let's dive headfirst into Pakistan cricket. In 2013, you wrote the infamous piece, The Haal of Pakistan. And more recently, you've self-admittedly tried to move away from it slightly for multiple reasons. And we'll try to get into both of them. So let's start with the argument for the Haal theory. In that piece, you have written that Haal is a state that makes a man not be himself. He has reached somewhere else. In the case of the Pakistan cricket team, it is the moment when Pakistan was about to turn it on. Pakistan is on, the scene is on. And anyone who's watched any cricket match with Pakistan knows exactly what you're talking about. Like, if you just think of it, I know of the Champions Trophy final, for example, the quarterfinal 2015 World Cup against Australia, Wahab Riaz spell. I remember there's an Asia Cup match against India, Afridi and Ashwin.
Last over 2 sixes.
Yeah, 2 sixes. There was a 2016 Asia Cup when Mohammad Amir, I think the T20 version of the Asia Cup. And then 1 month later was the T20 World Cup, and I think Mohammad Sami had this spell. And there's every single time that I watch something like this, I know exactly what you mean, because the first thought that doesn't go in my mind is, oh, that's a great bowling plan, or that was like great strategy. It's just there's a certain aura, a certain magic and energy that's taken over the game. And my gut instinct is always, what is happening? This is unreal. Like Virat Kohli never gives 2 catches in a row in a match of that stature. Or MS Dhoni will never hook the ball in the first 10 overs. That's not his style, right? So it's always like, what is happening? This can't be right. So in defense of the Haal theory, do you feel like just saying that this feeling, this aura, this energy, this force exists, something Waqar Younis also spoke about in that interview, that yes, we used to feel it when we were on the field. Do you think just saying that it exists, but we don't understand what it is, there's no analytics that can actually break it down, and just embracing it for what it is and just surrendering to it, do you think that is a right approach to take?
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote that piece, we were in an age of cricket where, I think data analytics had not penetrated the sport as it does now. And this was, that whole thing about the Haal was something that had been internalized in me, in almost any watcher of Pakistan cricket. We've seen it over the years, so many different occasions where they have just turned, they have switched on, and suddenly, the game and the world is not as you have known it 5 minutes ago, but it's completely different. And you're trying to explain it. And one of the times that it happened around that time, actually, 2012. One was in Abu Dhabi when they defended 140 in a test match against England. They bowled them out for 72. That was part of that, infamous kind of whitewash that Pakistan did of England. 3-0, they won that series in the UAE. And then there was that one game, and it was a game against Sri Lanka. And Pakistan, Sri Lanka, as India, Sri Lanka, they play so often that, sometimes the games all seem like one, like you just forget. 5 match series, 5 ODI series or whatever. And it was this game in Sharjah, and I was there. And so this Abu Dhabi test had happened, and I had felt something, and I'd written a smaller piece then for the National. And one reader had written to me after reading that piece, who was part of the Barmy Army. So he was sitting on the grass banks at the Sheikh Zayed Stadium, and he wrote to me like maybe a month after that piece. And he said that, I like really enjoyed your piece or whatever, but because he said that I also felt this like weird energy once Pakistan started taking wickets. I felt this really strange energy in the crowd, on the ground. And so I know what you felt. And I was like, okay, great, whatever. So that helped me then when I went to the Sharjah game when Pakistan played Sri Lanka, and Afridi, first saved them with the bat and then took 5 wickets, I think, and, helped them defend like 199. And Sri Lanka literally, I think, had been 150 for 3 or something. And suddenly Afridi got one through Sangakkara's defense, and then it was just all over. One by one it fell. And the biggest thing was, I was sitting next to Shahid Hashmi, who's a great, great, superb agency writer. So he writes for AFP, AFP news agency. He's their guy in Pakistan and that region. Has done years and years of cricket writing. And, agency writers are very kind of, agency copy you'll see, Reuters or AFP or AP, it's very strong on facts. No flowery language, just straight up, this is what happened in the match. Shahid Afridi scored 57 and took 5 wickets as Pakistan beat Sri Lanka by 17 runs to take a 3-1 lead in the series. That's the kind of, they have to like get, they are documenting history, so it's facts first. So he writes this copy, and this match was happening, and I was sitting next to him, and Afridi got Sangakkara out. And Shahid Bhai turned to me, and we've covered cricket for by that stage, we'd covered it for over 10 years together, and we'd seen each other at press boxes everywhere. And he turned to me and he said, "Kuch hone wala hai." And I was like, "Shahid Bhai, mujhe bhi yahi lag raha hai कि something is about to happen here." And so he had actually written an entire copy because, he has to file on time. So he had written an entire copy saying that Sri Lanka won the match by XX wickets, and I'll fill in the blanks when they've won. And then as soon as that wicket fell, he was like, "You know what?" And because he's such a good writer, he said, "I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to write another copy which says that Pakistan won this match just to be sure, just to be safe and just to cover myself." And so, he sensed it as well. He knew immediately. And he's like, he thinks straight, he looks for facts, but he sensed something in the air. And so I was like, man, that's a powerful feeling. So like, maybe I should do something about it. So then I started writing it. I started speaking to people about it. And I let my mind just go wherever it went in all kinds of, directions of inquiry. And I called up, I spoke to a Kawal, I spoke to a sports psychologist, I spoke to players from that time, and they all, spoke about it. Like the sports psychologists actually were really interesting because they said, what you're talking about, you're calling it Haal, but we call it the zone. When players get into the zone and they feel and they see differently, and they're completely like kind of, okay, we know what to do now, and they're doing it on autopilot, and so they do it, and that's how you kind of create great players. And so I did that piece, and it was fine. People liked it. I think it resonated with people to a degree. I brought in other influences, music, and listening and watching cricket at the same time and stuff. And then I think a few years later, when they won the Champions Trophy, and I didn't do like a. So people now think that it was like me saying that Haal was not accurate, maybe, or it was wrong. And I think what I was doing was trying to, and maybe I didn't do it well enough, but I was trying to bring a bit of nuance into it. And I was acknowledging the entry of like data and analytics and more structured and logical thinking about the game. And I was acknowledging the presence of that and also acknowledging it to a degree that, Pakistan, I think, did used to do that, even in Waqar's time. But it's just that sometimes I think, guys like Waqar and Wasim and all, they maybe couldn't articulate perfectly well what they were thinking. And, it's suggestive thinking. A journalist asked them a question that, that must have been some great feeling when you were doing this. And they respond that, yes, it was a great feeling. But because, they've done it over and over again, and sometimes they reply automatically. But I think if I had probed them a bit more and asked more kind of, more specific questions about some of these collapses that they caused, then I think, there would have been some acknowledgement of, we had a plan. The plan was a basic plan that, the ball is reversing now. So we're going to do this and we're going to have fielders here. We're going to have fielders there. And that's how this is going to work. And so, I think that kind of thinking about the game was always there. And I won't say I did it a disservice, because Haal was as much about the reaction of the reader as well, or the watcher, as much as what was going on in the game. And so the second piece that I did was kind of trying to acknowledge that, that kind of thinking must always have been there. It's not just that Pakistan turn up and unthinkingly they just do what they do because they're great, talented players. They think about their games. Every Pakistani player, they are smart, intelligent cricketers, which is why they are where they are. If you're playing for the national team, you clearly think about the game. You clearly know how the game works. You clearly have an idea of the game's key moments and the key fielding positions and, key stages of a game. You have that knowledge because you have to. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there at the top. So I think the second piece, which was after the Champions Trophy win, was just trying to kind of acknowledge that, no, it's not just that they're these mystical beings who have suddenly just turned on and done this amazing thing, but that they are like smart, thinking cricketers who have great skill. And one of those skills is recognizing a moment where they feel like, right, this is an opportunity. This is what we have to do. And a lot of the time they have players who are skillful enough and good enough, bowlers especially, who can do that. So I still say, I still stand by Haal. I think for the impact that Haal has on a viewer and a reader, maybe, you can feel it. And you may not be able to articulate it, but you can feel it. But I also now acknowledge that, Pakistani cricketers they're not just talented superstars. They are actually thinking, intelligent cricketers, athletes who are at the top of their game, and they're there because they are smart and intelligent.
In your heart of hearts, which side do you try to lean towards more? And I ask this because I vividly remember the kind of buzz that was around when Pakistan won the Champions Trophy, when they won that Asia Cup match I was talking about. On my friends' face, how much it was part of our conversations. The people were celebrating for months on end. And it just, because it was such an evocative moment, it just makes you feel so giddy. It gives you that rush that I felt like this. I mean, these are the kind of matches that really make you feel like, oh, this is why we watch sport, right? This is why we follow cricket. And on the other hand, it's like, okay, if you are strategic, if you are analytical, then you have successful teams that I sometimes find that they just remove the joy from watching cricket because they're so good at what they do. They're so well disciplined that it's just like, oh yeah, they went to the field, they executed all their plans, done. So in a way, I used to prefer this undercurrent which Pakistan team always had, was that on their day they can wipe out the strongest team. They always have that talent.
They do it. There's, it's really interesting. You ask which side. So I think with Pakistan, you get to sense both sides of the equation, and you get it with most teams. It just depends on which team you follow. I think on certain days, Sri Lanka, Andrew Fernando writes some great stuff about Sri Lanka. In a similar vein sometimes about the stuff that they do. But that Champions Trophy final, for example, there were still moments which are inexplicable in that game. So the luck of the Jasprit Bumrah no ball to Fakhar Zaman. Hadn't bowled a no ball, I think, or maybe had bowled one no ball in his entire career until that stage when he bowled that no ball and Fakhar got out. Inexplicable. Hafiz, who always wants to bat in the top order, Pakistan sent in at 5, which he hardly ever does. And he turned out to be this great death overs hitter, which he hadn't done before really, but he turned out to be this great kind of end overs hitter, hit that 50. The Azhar Ali drop catch of Kohli. And the chances of that next ball again being an opportunity. These are moments that, okay, you can practice all your life and plan for, but they don't go to plan. If they had gone to plan, Azhar Ali would have caught that catch. If they had gone to plan, Fakhar Zaman would not have gone 100. If they had gone to plan, Mohammad Hafiz would have gone one down and probably slowed down the Pakistani innings. Because that's what happens sometimes. But things didn't go to plan, and so I think you can. And there was also another. I think I wrote about this. I think it was Hafiz who actually the ball hit the stumps. It rolled off his bat from Bumrah. The ball rolled onto the stumps, hit the stumps, but the bails didn't fall.
Oh.
So, you have moments, and this was Hafiz. Hafiz was an important wicket from that time, but he didn't get out. So, I think the beauty about cricket, and probably any sport, is that you can go that way of data and analytics, but you can also have this element of it. And I think the key is to kind of try and incorporate both. Cricket has such a rich kind of narrative. Every cricket game has such rich narrative potential to it. That you can really go crazy with the kind of stories that you write about a game. You can really go like everywhere. So you can go hardcore data analytics, especially about T20 games. You can go towards that kind of write about matchups and different metrics and the tactics and the strategy of it. But it's such a broad canvas as a sport, and it's unlike any other sport in this, in this instance that has 3 formats. You can go completely the other way and write an entire book about one test match in which you don't talk about strategy or the tactics at all, because it offers you that platform. So I think the best cricket writing that I read, best cricket reportage I read, is usually something that blends both in. You don't go, I think, you don't become completely an analyst and write about a game, because, readers, I don't think the majority of readers want to read that much about the tactical side of it. Of course, people do. There are readers who want to, who want to know. But I think if you take a casual reader, then he would probably prefer some kind of blend of, great kind of narrative writing about a game, mixed in with some key kind of data insights and analytics, which helps them understand the game in a way that maybe they didn't before they started reading that piece. So I think, I at least strive to kind of be in the middle of both. And, I hate being this like in the middle person of things, but I see how, data and analytics has, for me, it's been a complete education. Some of our writers, Sid Monga, Karthik, KK, Sid Monga, Matt Roller here, some of our writers at Cricinfo and, outside of Cricinfo as well, Tim Wigmore, Jared, who see the game completely differently. And T20 especially, they see it in a different way to how I see it. And from reading their stuff and from reading the kind of stats that they do, Gaurav at Cricinfo is another guy, S. Rajesh is another guy. These guys, they think about the game, especially the T20 game, differently. And I think it's almost been a re-education for me to tap into that world. I don't want to lose myself in that world, but it's been a re-education to kind of look at the game the way they see it. And of course, try and retain that kind of the whatever it is, the lyricism, the beauty of the game in that sense, to try and kind of retain that. And I think, what I strive to do constantly is just to be kind of, I guess, in the middle of it both.
Yeah, there is a perfect blend out there for sure. I tend to lean more towards the emotion side of it. I used to always gravitate towards cricketers like Afridi, Sehwag, Lance Klusener, recently Brendan McCullum. And I think one of the reasons I do this is because on their day when they're performing, I don't think of their technique is this, or this is their stance, or this is what they're doing.
Just the feeling of
You're experiencing like a force of nature that day, and you just like give in to that feeling, and then it's just about how you feel at the moment.
Yeah, like Sehwag, I was really lucky that like kind of the busiest years of my career, I guess, as touring and watching cricket around the world, were when Sehwag was at his absolute peak, and I got to saw him so often, and it was just, Sehwag was just amazing to watch. Virender Sehwag was just, he was absolutely hands down my favorite batsman of that age, because he did things no other batter did. He did things. He changed games in the way no other batsman at the time was doing. Bowlers didn't make any difference to him. It didn't make a difference to him whether Murli was coming in round the wicket or over the wicket, or whether Shoaib Akhtar was bowling bouncers at him, or whether he was bowling. So it didn't make a difference to him. He just went out there and, of course he had great skill and he had intelligence as well. But literally, I think his genius was that he reduced the game to its simplest form, which was, you see the ball, and if you see a gap, you try and hit the ball through that gap and you go for the boundary. And it was just amazing. It was pure, like just pure batsmanship of the highest quality. And I don't think I've been able to capture that sense in a batsman again, as I did like watching Sehwag. He was just a real force to watch at that time.
Virender Sehwag was my favorite cricketer growing up. And it was such, now in hindsight, I mean, I didn't really understand the gravity of it, but now in hindsight, him and Sachin opening together is such a contrast, but also so similar. It was
Yeah, so because when he first came, people were like, he's another mini Sachin, right? People were like,
Sachin,
he's like the other Sachin, and he wasn't at all like Sachin. Ultimately, he was not at all like him. So
it was crazy, and I ended up gravitating more towards Sehwag in a lineup filled with Sachin, Dravid, Lakshman, Ganguly, great batsmen, but it was Sehwag who always appealed to me. Interesting you mentioned Sehwag. My next question is kind of tied to it, so maybe you might have to find a different example now. Was that you have written and watched about so many different cricketers. So is there any one particular cricketer that when you were watching them, writing about them, that you felt like this cricketer has reached their Haal, their zones, they've reached the flow state, and what they were doing at that moment, they're operating in a completely different dimension. This is not even human. This is, in a way, it's a spiritual experience just to watch them play.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Sehwag was one. I think the other one was Brian Lara. I watched him score a double 100, his last Test 100, in fact, in Multan on the 2006-07 tour that West Indies made. And, that wasn't a great West Indies side. It was fairly weak. They were beaten by Pakistan 2-0. But Lara scored in the drawn test at Multan. He scored a double 100, took 26 off a Danish Canaria over. And he was he was beautiful to watch, like in that entire innings, amazing to watch, as always. But there was this moment when I think he was past 100, and Pakistan were already realizing that, okay, it's going to be tough to stop him, so we've got to make some plans. And Inzi was captain, I think, and in that period, Lara had scored a couple of hundreds against Pakistan already. So he'd scored one in West Indies, great 100 over there, and then he was on 100 now. And so Inzi brought Abdur Razak onto bowl and put basically three men at point to Lara's point, and started getting him to bowl wide basically, and try and maybe get a slice up in the air to one of the points. There was a fine point, there was a conventional point, and there was just one to the left of point. Wasn't a cover, very close in, and he said, this is my strategy. I'm going to cover you here, and I'm going to stop you from scoring. And Lara, of course, he saw the first two balls of it from Razak. First two balls went past, I think, the outside. He didn't play them; they were a little bit wide. And then he started piercing that three-man cordon, and literally there must have been maybe 10, 15 meters between the three. And Lara hit one boom to the right of the finest guy, then hit one through the middle of the first two guys, and then hit one through the middle of the second two guys there. And it was and he was literally you could see that he was doing it. You could see that this guy is and whether it was him in his own Haal or in his own zone, I think that's what he was always like. If you gave him a challenge, then he would not just prevent that challenge, he would actively beat you down. And so, the way he just picked, he was like, okay, right now I'm going to hit you here, now I'm going to hit you here, and now I'm going to hit you here. Each of the times I'm going to hit you through these gaps, and, you won't know what to do after that. And it was just amazing to watch. And it reminded me of a story, I think, that Rahul Bhattacharya wrote about once. Great writer, Rahul, great friend, of course. But I'm trying to remember what innings it was, but Lara was batting against Australia. And I think McGrath was bowling at him, and I'm trying to remember the exact detail, but basically he pulled a fielder away from, I think, deep mid-wicket and took him to point. And telegraphing that he was going to start bowling outside his off stump now. And Gilchrist is the guy who tells the story behind the stumps. Gilchrist apparently just heard Lara say, he hissed, Rahul wrote, he hissed mistake. And next three balls, I think he just pulled these balls from outside off stump through mid-wicket. He just telegraphed it. He just hissed mistake, and then just bam, bam, bam. You shouldn't have moved that fielder from there, because now I'm going to pepper that area right there. I'm going to do it because I'm good enough. So the skill that he had was just insane, what he could do. So I think he was at his peak, he was just in his own zone where you couldn't touch him. I don't think he literally was. Sehwag was like this. Sehwag, when he was in his zone at his peak, it was impossible to stop him. That one of his great innings, I think, was the double hundred in Colombo or Galle on a really tough
294?
pitch. No, I think it was the 200 out of like a total of 300 against Sri Lanka.
All right.
Murli and Ajanta Mendes. It was Ajanta Mendes' first series, that like famous first DRS series, 2008. I think it was in Sri Lanka, and he played one of the all-time great innings where everyone else struggled, but he was in his own world, in his own zone, just like taking it on, going at a strike rate of 90, where like the strike rate after that, the highest was like maybe 35 or something, So in his own zone completely. And yeah, the other guys, I remember Asif in a couple of his spells, Mohammad Asif, just like, you knew that, okay, this guy, he's found this line, he's found this length, and he's just going to rip through this batting order. Whatever it is, he's just going to rip through it. Asif, Shoaib Akhtar in that series against England, possibly at his, I think even in his career, that was probably his peak, the way he bowled in that series, the slower balls also, but also the pace. And since then, guys like Afridi, I had the great pleasure of watching Bumrah bowl at the Oval last year against England. I don't know if you remember that absolutely wonderful last day, beating hot sun, nothing in the pitch, like nothing it was such a flat pitch that even like with batting as bad as England's, like people were thinking, oh, England might actually chase down 360. It was that bad. Yeah. It was that flat. And Bumrah came on for a 6-over spell just after lunch. And me and Nagraj Gulapuri were sitting outside in the stands. We got out from the press box. It was post-lunch, and we thought, we'll watch and soak in the atmosphere. It was a lovely sunny day. And Bumrah came on to bowl this spell, 6 overs, where he got the ball to start reversing. Took 2 wickets, got Bairstow bowled and Ollie Pope bowled through the gate. Pure pace, pure reverse. And it just, the feeling in the crowd, we were sitting outside, and the feeling was just electric. Everyone in that stadium at the Oval, maybe 30,000 people, I don't know how many you get in there, but maybe 25, 30,000 people, every single person knew that Bumrah is going to get wickets. Everyone knew he was going to reverse it. Everyone knew he was going to be quick, even the batsman, and he still got those wickets. And it was just an amazing feeling, like electric throughout the crowd. And this was one of those, like, one of the most recent Haal moments that I've had, was that you just sat out there and you soaked it in because you knew he was going to do it. And it was an absolute privilege to watch him do it live. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I would have loved to be there. When you're talking about Brian Lara, I had the honor of, when I went to the Sydney cricket ground, and when I went there, Stuart McGill was coaching a few students. And I went up to him and I just said, hi, can I get a picture? And then I was like, can I ask you one question? Who was the toughest batsman you ever bowled to? And he looks at me and he says, it's not who you're thinking. And he says it was Brian Lara, because what he said was, Sachin, you could make plans, and then it was tough to get Sachin out, but you could take that as a challenge. But bowling to Brian Lara was demotivating. He felt like whenever he used to bowl to Brian Lara, he used to feel like, why am I a bowler? I should just give this up completely, because he used to toy with him. Brian Lara used to always toy with Stuart McGill. So I always remember that. And I always remember that comparison between Lara and Tendulkar. Right. So in the book Beyond the Boundary, CLR James asked the question, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know? In your work, you have found many different links between Pakistan's cricket and, of course, the soul of the nation. So the history, the culture, you've tied it with music, qawwalis, you brought in a bit of Sufism as well. In your Haal piece, you even tied it with Coke Studio, and you've also covered a bit of politics. So in the Haal piece, actually, you also, when you talk about politics, you spoke about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and you spoke about how he embodied the Pakistani bluster and bluff. The old trick of being down and out, but fooling or willing everyone into believing that you've never been as powerful as this before. Because Pakistan lives fullest in the imagining of its own imminent death. It is at and for this moment that Pakistan and its citizens stir and fight and burn bright. And I found this to be a very interesting insight into how the political zeitgeist of a country can actually shape the character of a sports team. You've, in other pieces and other interviews, you've spoken about how General Zia, not to give him many compliments, but how his contribution is in a way promoting Pakistan cricket to serve as a distraction towards the public. How maybe Javed Miandad's entire style of play and his personality was in a way built upon like a rooted sense of insecurity over like some class divide between him and, let's say, Imran Khan, who came from an upper class. So it's interesting to see how like the facets from the society actually influencing the sports team in general. So I want to change CLR James' question for you and ask you, what do they know of Pakistani cricket who only cricket know? How deep are the links currently between the cricket and the country's history, music, politics, and what do they look like today?
I mean, yeah, like you talk about politics and culture and music, and I think, cricket is that kind of generic thing. It is a culture. It is politics. Any sport that becomes so embedded in a country, or comes out from a country in the way that cricket has in India and Pakistan, that it can't help be completely part of that country. So it reflects everything that happens in the country will be reflected in the way the game is run, the way the players play. It's very much part of the fabric of life itself in Pakistan. Every little thing, everywhere you go, and I've been to India enough times. I know it's the same in India, that everywhere you go, conversation, culture, economics, every signifier you see, has some element of cricket in it. Always, it's impossible to avoid, because what else is there? So I mean, in one way, it's a very simple answer, is that it is everything in that country, just like, or it is as intrinsic to that country as the politics of that country, as the music of that country, as the culture of that country. It is one of those products. It is an identifier of that nation in the way it is. Yeah, and I see it as totally like, we talk about, say, if we talk about Pakistan's music or Pakistan's political scene, we talk about cricket in the same sense. It's far beyond the sport. It is a characteristic, and I used to say, I said once or twice before that it's not even, people say that it's a religion or whatever. I don't think it is that. It's almost a majburi. It's a compulsion. You can't help but be cricket, because it's there, it's everywhere. It's seeped into the cultures, it's seeped into the soil of that country and any other country so deeply that you could do whatever. You could have terrorist attacks that take the game away for 10 years from there, and what that does is only strengthen the love for that sport in that country. It doesn't kill it, as people thought it might when international cricket went away from Pakistan. People thought, oh no, what's going to happen? Well, what happened was that people ended up loving it even more. It became even a bigger part of that country. It became embedded even more into that country. So, I say very much that it's more than a habit. It's a compulsion. It's a majburi that you can't help but have cricket around you. And so through cricket, you see, you can kind of explain how life works in Pakistan. Yeah, you can, in the way that it does. There is some reward for merit. That in that if you are a talented cricketer, I genuinely believe that nothing will stop you from at least getting some opportunity to play at the highest level. It's one of the few things where, like, if you are genuinely gifted, genuinely talented, somebody will find you and somebody will put you in a place where you can give it a shot at the highest level of cricket in that country, and you will get a chance. It reduces the gap between class. If a cricketer like Amir can come from where he came, if a cricketer like Shoaib Akhtar can come from where he came and be what they are now, Amir lives in Dubai in England. Shoaib Akhtar is one of the most well-known personalities in England. Shoaib Akhtar himself once said, it was on his retirement, actually. I remember he retired at the 2011 World Cup. He announced his retirement at a press conference in Colombo. And he said there that, people forget. And he wanted to remember, and he said that people forget how much even playing one game of cricket changes the lives of the person who has played that game. He's like, if you play just one game of cricket for Pakistan and your life turns around, it's completely changed. Like you might not play another game ever before, but you can always be an international cricketer for Pakistan. And, the things that he said that, I learned how to swim because of cricket. I didn't know how to swim. I got a driving license because of cricket. I got a passport. I got my identity. I literally got my identity documents because of cricket. I learned how to speak English because I played cricket. I learned how to eat with a knife and fork because I played cricket. So if you look at it in those terms, some of these cricketers, where they come from, it completely transforms what they are. It teaches them many things. It teaches them, good and bad things, I'm sure. Turns them into superstars, changes like not only their lives, but the lives of like their family and this entire like little economy that they have around them of, hanger-oners and agents and this and that. They become like little economies in themselves. And so I think, it's almost like, if you become a politician, or if you become a really successful musician, or if you become an actor, whatever it is, if you become a successful cricketer in Pakistan, a country like Pakistan, then the country is yours to kind of for it opens doors for you in a way that very few other things in Pakistan will do. So I'm straying a bit from your question, but I genuinely think that it is I don't think the cricket just is so much a part of the Pakistan experience that you have to just treat it generically, like if you talk about Pakistan's politics or Pakistan's whatever, then you talk about its cricket in the same way. It's it's that deeply embedded. And I think the 10-year exile that they had with no international cricket in Pakistan, I think that's burrowed it further into the country's kind of psyche and its blood and its veins, or whatever.
In a way, I feel like this is a very, I love the answer. It's like a perfect summary of how every single facet is included within the sports team, because often you hear the argument that it's just a silly little game. There are just 11 people, bat and ball, football, just 11 people running behind a ball. But I always feel there's more to sport, and there's a lot of meaning that's encapsulated in what's happening on the field. And there are a lot of stories to be told. It's not just a game.
Well, you touched on it earlier, and maybe I should have included in this answer, is that when I started researching my history, the Unquiet Ones, for when I started researching it back in 2007, I had lived in Pakistan for 5 years by that stage, so I was fairly new to the country. I'd lived abroad all my life, and so even though I was Pakistani, I wasn't completely embedded into the country by that stage, and I was working somewhere. I was working at cricket for at the time, but when I started researching, then I realized that through cricket, I basically learned everything about the country. Its entire history came to me through cricket. I didn't go in with the intention of learning about the country, but I learned about, the doctrine of necessity, which is a political thing. I learned about the first coup in Pakistan. I learned about the Rawalpindi conspiracy. I learned about how PIA came up. And, all these things I learned about. I learned about some great educational institutions in Pakistan. I learned about all these things purely because I set out in search of finding out about cricket in the country. And, when I was there at the time, I could of course speak Urdu, but my first language was English, effectively, because I'd lived abroad, and when I started covering cricket, because I had to hang around with journalists, local journalists, and travel to smaller cities, Bahawalpur, Sialkot, which isn't of course that small, but the non-metros kind of in those years. When I had to travel there, I had to speak in Urdu. And so it actually helped me become more Pakistani just by covering. So, that's in a way, that's an illustration of what cricket is in that country. Yeah. It's a way through which you become Pakistani. In my case, it was a way through which I became more Pakistani than I had been at any stage in my life.
Cricket helps you become more Pakistani, helps you find your identity. Yeah, I completely resonate with this for sure. Okay, so before we start wrapping up, I want to check one more thing with you. Recently, the cricket community lost one of the legends of the game, Shane Warne. And I wanted to just read out a small poem in his memory, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So the poem is called The Dash, and it goes something like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. Gideon Haigh has described Shane Warne as the soul of indiscretion in a prim, censorious game. I wanted to get your thoughts on Shane Warne as well. What did he represent to you? What did the dash between his ears mean for you?
Oh, man, Shane Warne was... he traumatized, and of course, his Ashes record and his record against India is talked about more, but he traumatized Pakistan through his entire existence. He was such a bowler, that I think him and McGrath were really up there. And I think as a Pakistani, we came across Shane Warne in a slightly different way to the rest of the world, because we already had Abdul Qadir and we'd had Mushtaq Ahmed around the same time as Shane Warne. And so I think there was a sense of proprietorship over leg spin. We were like, okay, yeah, Shane Warne is good, but we had Abdul Qadir and he had the googly, and we have Mushtaq, who's won a World Cup already in '92, and Shane Warne was getting hit by Ravi Shastri at that stage. We were like, yeah, Shane Warne maybe. But then you started to watch him, you started to see him bowl, and you kind of removed yourself from the nationalist context of watching him bowl against Pakistan, but you watch him bowl. and the things he could do with that ball, like, just physical, like, so, I believe greatly in like the aesthetics of sports. Like that's what attracts me in a big way. So football, basketball, these are beautiful sports to watch at their greatest moments. They're, beautiful at their greatest kind of feats. They are beautiful things to watch, and that appeals to me strongly, of course, in cricket. We romanticize the cover drive or the fast Yorker or whatever. So visually, I think that's always been important in any sport, that you see something happen physically and you're like, whoa, how the hell did that happen? Like you may not be that into the game, but if you see something like that, you're like, wow. So I always thought with Shane Warne, what he used to do with the ball, whether it was that flipper or whether it was the big leg breaks early on in his career, whether it was a zooter, he did so much that looked impossible with the ball that, even if you hadn't watched cricket, you'd be like, okay, this guy is the business. This guy is doing something that is clearly special. I may not understand exactly how special and why it's that special, but I have seen, like, you take some examples. Obviously, the Gatling ball is a famous one. The ball to Saeed Anwar at Brisbane, the ball to Andrew Strauss, the ball to Lakshman, the ball to, I wrote about this, the ball to, who was it? I've forgotten. The ball to MK Prasad in 99, which, was kind of delivered from over the wicket, and it drifted, like it went and it just drifted and bowled him around his legs, from over the wicket to bowl somebody around their legs who's just playing like a defensive prod. It was just insane. So, the things that he did with the ball, I think at its most elemental, that was just cricket. Because you saw that and you were like, okay, this guy. And then you saw, of course, the blonde hair and the celebration and the zinc on the lips and stuff. And you're like, okay, this guy's a rock star, but it's because he does rock star things on the field. So, like, for that, I think for Shane Warne, we talk sometimes, just within Cricinfo about maybe doing something sometime on who's the most influential cricketer in the world, in the sense that they make you want to play, they make kids want to play the game. So we always, we look at Shahid Afridi as one, because everybody in Pakistan, Afghanistan, even, players in India, when they're growing up, they're like, I want to be like him. I want to play like Shahid Afridi plays. Shane Warne was one of those guys. Shane Warne was a guy who, leg spinners come out now and they're like, I want to bowl like Shane Warne, because he was just amazing. And so, I think that impact of what he did physically and the impact that it had on people who might not have been in the game, I think that has always stood out for me. Like, all his wickets, of course, he was a great bowler, and then the strategy and the tactics and the mind of Warne, but the pure physical act of how much he used to spin a ball and how the crazy ways in which he used to get batsmen out, I will never forget that. At its most elemental, at its most basic, it was just crazy what he did. And you and I were talking earlier about, like, the kind of romantic side of this. You watch things and you see them and you're like, wow, Sehwag over point or flicking through mid wicket or whatever, and then you see Shane Warne bowling somebody a leg break and it's absolutely the same level. You're like, wow, that is something that I need to keep watching over and over again. And I think for me that was just the biggest impact of Warne, is what he made the game look like when he was playing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. So, like I mentioned, I vividly remember getting into cricket in 2003. And I largely got in through by reading newspaper articles and building images. There's a kind of a fictional image that I built off. And that was the year Shane Warne was banned. So he was not there. And there was this...
Just before the World Cup.
Always this mention that... And I already had this image of the Australian cricket team as unbeatable. And there's always a mention of, like, this one player who's missing, who's gonna come and, like, make it even better. I was like, how is this even possible? Like, how can you... Yeah. How is the best player still not there? And still the Australian team is at that level. And then all these articles that talk about him. And then when he came, somehow he was even better and bigger and richer than the image I built in my mind. Because Shane Warne was he was a phenomenon of his own.
The stuff he did, like, after that World Cup, I remember that the 2004 series in India, when they finally won a series in India, I think 2-1 they won. Gilchrist was captain and Ponting was supposed to be captain, I think. Yeah, that's right. Gilchrist captain. And Shane Warne's bowling in that series was, he picked up maybe 13 wickets in 4 test matches. So he wasn't his usual kind of, big wicket taking self. But the way he bowled, the smartness with it, he realized that his role was not to be the showman, but, not with the big spinning leg breaks. But my role was to be the guy who keeps the run rate down to 2 runs and over. Yeah. Bowled defensive fields, attacking lines, but defensive fields. And, he picked up some crucial wickets. Lakshman at Bangalore is one of the all-time great wickets that he picked up. Bit of drift. To get somebody like Lakshman, bit of drift, into his pads, take top of off, just amazing to get that. But the way he changed himself for that series, the way he kind of controlled his own ego and showmanship and said, no, I'm going to support McGrath and Kasparovic, who are going to be the wicket takers here, and Jason Gillespie. They're going to be the wicket takers here. I'm just going to support them in the background and keep a lid on the run rate. And it helped Australia win that one series. In India, they haven't won a series since. That was their first win for like 30 years and stuff. So his performance there was just further proof. I mean, we didn't need it by that stage, but this was after the World Cup, and he had just come back from that drugs ban. Yeah. India had drawn that series without him in Australia, the 2003-04 series. And then, he came back and he did this, and it was just like, you are the best. Absolutely.
Fantastic cricketer, fantastic personality, and definitely made the world richer by just being in it. Okay, let's start moving into our final questions. So what are some books, movies, or people that have strongly influenced you in your life?
You're talking cricket only, or?
In general.
God, books, many. These days, by these days, I mean the last maybe 4 years, I've been reading a lot of Graham Greene novels. Just, suddenly, I don't know how I picked them up. I think I picked them up because the first one I had read was Brighton Rock many years ago. I was living in Brighton at the time, so I read that, and it was a great book. And then when I came here again, I came to England in 2019. I picked them up because Graham Greene is a huge part of the kind of literature culture here. So I've been reading a lot of him. Probably the best fiction book I've read recently, maybe over the last 3-4 years, is The Noise of Time. It's by Julian Barnes. Great book, absolutely amazing book, and the main reason it's amazing is because it's about the tension between art and expression and controlling that art. It's about a musician in Russia, in communist Russia, and the struggles he goes through while being a state musician, but also being part of the communist machinery or whatever. So amazing book, like easily one of the best books I've read recently. I'm trying to think of some cricket books, actually. I feel like I should name check some cricket books that I've read recently, but
one of your favorite, or recently, one of your favorites is Rahul Bhattacharya's book.
Of course, yeah, that's like an all-time classic. Pandits from Pakistan, an all-time classic. I was with Rahul on that tour. We kind of became friends on that tour. He came, stayed over at our place in Karachi, and we were both working on the magazine Wisden Asia Cricket at that time with Sambit, who's the editor. And that book is just one of its kind. Like, it's the kind of book that nobody has an opportunity to write anymore, sadly, because the tour diary book is kind of, it used to be a staple of cricket literature, but it's kind of gone out because fewer people tour now, and the book industry has changed completely. But that was, I think it was cricket literature at its best, because cricket was kind of only incidental to it. He was there as an Indian, as a young Indian in Pakistan, kind of discovering Pakistan, this country that he had seen on TV through cricket matches all his life, and suddenly he had a chance to tour that country, and so that way it's just it's an amazing book. And I say cricket is incidental to it, but one of the best bits about it is that the writing on cricket is so sharp itself. It's just beautiful writing, and I don't think there's a better writer than Rahul out there generally, whether it's cricket or anything else. I don't think there's a more beautiful writer going than him. So Pandits from Pakistan, War Minus the Shooting, I've had the opportunity to read again recently. Siddharth Vaidyanathan, another cricket info guy, has republished that book, done a great service, because that again is one of the most kind of insightful and mind-blowing kind of books. To think that he wrote it in 1996, Mike Marcuse, and it was about the 96 World Cup that was held in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Amazing book that captured just that time when cricket, you could just sense that cricket was expanding and blowing up in the subcontinent, and so it would lead eventually to India becoming the cricket behemoth, the BCCI becoming that kind of behemoth, and the Indian market becoming so massive. So that was War Minus the Shooting. I had the chance to read that again. Great book. What else have I read?
Movies and people also.
Movies. So I've got there's just too many. I think these days it's more like streaming shows more than anything. Right. I'm watching Winning Time, the Lakers dynasty at the moment, which is great. It's just great storytelling. I think it plays fast and loose with the truth, I think, according to a lot of journalists, but it's just great storytelling. It's absolutely wonderful. I have some affinity for basketball. Other movies, it's probably the regular ones. Big Godfather fan, of course. Big fan of the Bourne trilogy. I don't know why I love the Jason Bourne films. I can watch them anytime, any day. One of the films I love the most, actually, which I do watch quite often, is a 1970s it's I guess like a spy thriller, but more a surveillance thriller called The Conversation, starring Gene Hackman and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And it's this film about basically a surveillance expert who bugs people's houses and flats and stuff, and he's into that. And it's just a really very paranoid kind of thriller, but it uses sound brilliantly. There's very muffled dialogue throughout the film. The dialogue is very, very muffled, and there's a big part jazz music in the background, always playing in the background. Very, very atmospheric. Great, very taut, tight storyline and plot, and with a great twist as well. And just a really good film, The Conversation. So, I'm just like literally remembering some that are coming into my head right now. But you can put me down in front of the TV and I'll watch anything. I'll watch sports, I'll watch like the news, I'll watch a documentary. I will literally watch anything.
No, it's a great list and definitely want to check those out. Okay. In the movie Yesterday, the protagonist wakes up and he finds out that the world has completely forgotten about the Beatles. They've been erased from memory. So if you were in that position and you wake up and you find out that everyone's forgotten about Pakistan cricket, completely erased from memory, the loss of which one cricketer would you think would be the greatest loss?
Man, that's a tough question.
I don't know why you thought this was going to be a show of easy questions.
See, it could be an easy question, but then once I start thinking about it, then we're going to read tough question. My first instinctive answer would be Wasim Akram. I grew up idolizing him, watching him, banking on him, hoping that he would do something. Always, and it was always, whenever, as a fan growing up, whenever Wasim Akram was around, we were always like, okay, Wasim will handle this, So he was he was a banker. You relied on Wasim Akram, and he always pulled through. And he was, of course, with it, he was a magician with what he did, And he was, he was cool, and he was good looking, and he was tall, and got an earring in the mid 90s, and we were like, whoa, man, what Pakistani cricketer goes out and gets an earring? Like, he was like, what's going on there? Started playing golf at an early age. We were like, oh, okay, so he's, he's fairly global. And I feel like if I had been born 10 years earlier, I probably would have said Imran Khan. And I still do to an extent. Imran Khan, I think, great cricketer. I won't get into his politics, but absolutely, amazing cricketer. But I think for me, the guy that I think, if suddenly Pakistan cricket was erased, then Wasim Akram would be like, because Wasim Akram, I think in him are some of the most resonant kind of tropes of Pakistani cricket, fast bowler, exceptional talent, all-round talent, didn't quite come from nowhere, but came from a nondescript enough, background for him to not be well-versed into cricket, and suddenly he bursts onto the scene. Second test match, takes 10 wickets in New Zealand, and, Imran takes him under his wing and he becomes a captain, and he's flawed, of course, because of the whole match-fixing thing. So I think, Wasim was just one of those guys who I think through him, you can learn a lot about Pakistan cricket, and thus you can learn a lot about Pakistan and the way it is. So I think he would be, for me at least, he would be big. But, somebody will beat me over the head and say, well, how dare you not say Shahid Afridi or Javed Mirdad or this guy or that guy or Imran himself or Kardar. Abdul Hafiz Kardar, we never talk about, but the guy pretty much created Pakistan cricket, and helped a lot in the building of Pakistan itself and stuff. So, too many, but I think if I had to stretch out on a limb, I would say Wasim Akram.
Yeah, no, the rich history that Pakistan cricket has, it was meant to be a tough question, and I think Wasim Akram is a great answer.
It's an easy, safe answer, I think.
Easy, safe answer. One cricketer that you think currently is under the radar, but in the next 5 years is going to be the next big thing?
From anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world.
Who's there? Let me think. I think Abdullah Shafiq, Pakistan's opener, is and I'm saying this because I've seen him recently, but have been kind of following him for a bit. I think he's going to be massive. He's going to be like the first good Pakistani opener for a while. I think. Many things may go wrong, but I think if he is, and this is a big if, I guess, if he is treated right by Pakistan selectors, and if he gets the opportunities that he should, I think he should be a really, really top quality opener for Pakistan, which, that again, they haven't had for a long time. So it'd be good to get him in there. I think Shadab Khan and Fahim Ashraf are vastly underrated cricketers. I know within Pakistan, they're appreciated as all-rounders, but I think truly they are two all-rounders, and Pakistan haven't had genuine quality all-rounders for a long time. And so I still feel like they are underappreciated, and that they will, over the next 5 years, become, they should kind of come big. Recently, just very, very recently, I've seen Umran Malik bowl a bit at the IPL, and my God, he's exciting. He's just great to watch. I know it's only 4 overs or whatever, but it's 4 great overs. It's 24 great balls to watch, and that's all you need. Sometimes that's all you need. So Umran Malik is great to watch. I love Pant. I love Rishabh Pant, absolutely. And he's not under the radar or anything, but these are just guys that I hope and pray that they do well, and so that we continue watching them for the next, however many, 10, 15 years or whatever. Pant is one, Bumrah is another. The Indian team, I quite enjoy watching at the moment. I think across all formats, they've got some really interesting players, and really good, like, again, aesthetically, they're great to watch in the way they are and stuff, So, yeah, I'm sure New Zealand will have some crazy cricketer who we haven't heard of yet, but who's going to be really good in the next 2-3 years. He'll suddenly come out. He'll be South African born or something, and he'll come out and he'll be really amazing. One guy I hope does really well is Bavuma, Temba Bavuma. I think he's just a really, really good cricketer, but I think, of course, he's burdened with a lot of history, as like, the next great kind of African black batter. But I really, really hope that he does well. Wherever he goes, as a captain, as a batter, outstanding fielder, of course, anyway, but I hope he does kind of.
You brought up Bavuma. I really like Bavuma. Also, Rassie van der Dussen, I really feel.
Yeah, Van der Dussen is a very good batsman. He's actually a very, very good. Again, cricket, like, becomes obsessed with, like, the big 3 nations, India, Australia, and England. You kind of, like, you miss the rest. But guys like Rassie van der Dussen, very, very good to watch. And Nicholas Poorer, love watching him. Hetmeyer, these are all, good guys. One of the guys who actually really impressed me in the last year was Jayden Seals, West Indies fast bowler. Really, really good to watch. Really good to watch. I like Joshua De Silva as well. I think he's like, just that kind of nuggety wicketkeeper batter who, it does good things for his team. And, he was instrumental in West Indies' test win over England recently, the 1-0 series, when he was absolutely instrumental in that. I really like him. I like Jayden Seals. And Marco Jansen, South Africa, he's already made an impact against India in the Test series, and now he made an impact yesterday in the IPL. I was watching, 3 wickets in his first over. I think Jared wrote about him that he could have something that only Bruce Reed had. If you remember Bruce Reed, I think he may have been before your time, but Bruce Reed was 6'7", left arm Australian beanpole of a bowler who was absolutely outstanding, had everything, but he just couldn't stay fit. He kept getting injured, so he ended up playing only about 27 Test matches in his entire career, but he was an absolutely outstanding bowler. And so Marco Jansen, he has the attributes. He has the pace, he has a bit of swing, he has a bit of seam. He's left arm, so he's got the angle. I think he's going to be absolutely outstanding as well. I hope he's going to be absolutely outstanding.
I'm going to give you minus 20 points for that because I asked one cricketer.
And I've given many. I've given the whole global list I've given.
But in a way, it's a good thing because that means the future of cricket is quite bright. In the words of Ravish Shastri, means cricket is the winner.
So
let's go to our final 2 questions. What would you like your legacy to be like?
Oh my God. I don't think of anything like my leg. I'm not a significant enough person to have a legacy of any kind. I just hope... I honestly, like, the one thing I hope for is that the people who read my stuff, like, like, you have a love for reading, I have a love for reading, I like reading good things, they make your day better. And if you learn something from them, it's even better. And I just hope that at some point my writings have, made someone's day a little bit better, or made somebody love the game a bit more, or, maybe wanted them to, or maybe made them want to write. But legacy and all, I'm just a journalist, man.
I'll counter that actually, because So one of the highlights for my month always is the Cricket Monthly that Cricinfo does, and it's a great team of writers. And you had a piece about Muhammad Amir, and when you read pieces like that, I remember like this is not just you're not just reading about a cricketer, you are getting a window into Pakistan of a certain time and like how it is now, what links exist. And I mean, every piece is so evocative in that sense. Like the Muhammad Amir piece, you had so many different references. You had something about the Kawali. I think you mentioned Reshma in that piece, so maybe I'm confused. There's Bilal tennis. There's all these
Bilal tennis. Yeah.
the Bilal tennis. So the more you mention, and then you go down this rabbit hole. Who's this? And you find out more. You spoke about the region he comes from and the culture there, and it's just no. I think the every piece you leave behind is like, I mean, it's giving you a very solid legacy. You are in a way opening up Pakistan to the rest of us, the ones who haven't really traveled there yet, through cricket, through an avenue that we really like. So I think it is a very strong legacy for sure.
I appreciate that. I hope so. But like I say, I'm just a journalist, man. Just trying to make a living writing about cricket.
I agree to disagree.
I'll say this, and I say this everywhere I speak. I'll say that I am incredibly grateful to be able to make a living out of doing something like this. You know, I know that, you know, people do a lot of shitty jobs out there in their lives and they make do with what they have. I have been incredibly fortunate, incredibly lucky to be doing something like this. You know, even on my worst days, my worst work days, I can always say that, look, listen, you know, just a bit of perspective. You are making a living watching a sport. Like, you know, that's it for me. I cannot ask for anything more than that. Incredibly fortunate, incredibly grateful for it as well.
No, I'm motivated. I'm sending my resignation tomorrow. Final question for you. We've spoken extensively about Haal slightly earlier. We flirted a bit with Sufism, with spiritualism. So this just ties into my final question. What do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, man, these kind of questions. How can this be the last question? This should be like the first question that started off this podcast. You know? I don't know. I honestly, I don't think about it. You know, the meaning of my life is to be, you know, but it's going to sound corny, but, you know, the son, to be a husband, to be a father to my two girls, and to make a living. You know, I'm very happy. I try, and the meaning of my life, I would hope is to make other people's lives more livable. You know, whether that's by me being nice to them one day, or them reading something that I have done, or me just, you know, meeting somebody. I hope that I don't affect anyone's life in a way that leaves it worse than it was before they met me. That would be literally, for me, that is, you know, I don't want to leave anyone in a worse off situation than when I met them, whether that's mentally or physically or whatever. So the meaning of life otherwise is, I don't know, just live. I live to write. I love writing. I wish I could write more. You know, I have other responsibilities at work now, but I wish I could write more often. I live to write, and I hope to be able to document the life that I live at some point.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that book whenever it comes out. And yes, I've not met you in person, but the work that the pieces that you write definitely does improve other people's life and does make it a lot more livable. So definitely a lot of meaning there. Usman, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you online, in person, read your books, read your work, where can they do so?
It's probably best to hit me up on Twitter. I'm just at Osman Samiuddin, my full name. Email and stuff, you know, you'll find. But Twitter is where I'm most accessible. I don't do that much other social media, but yeah, Twitter, I'm fine. I try and respond to as many people as I can on it. But I also try and avoid like social media generally. But, you know, that's a whole nother podcast, I think.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Usman. It was an honor talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great. It was really nice to talk about cricket generally and life generally. It's nice to, you know, have broader conversations about the game than just the game itself. So always a pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.